A poor girl is forced to wash dishes at a party, but when her billionaire husband arrives. Imagine walking into a world where glittering chandeliers cast their light over polished marble floors, where laughter flows as freely as the champagne in crystal glasses. Now imagine being ripped from that dream and thrown behind the scenes, forced to scrub dishes while wearing a uniform 2 sizes too small. This is exactly what happens to Elena, a woman who once had everything but now finds herself at the mercy of cruel fate. Her story begins with hope, a carefully preserved navy blue dress, an invitation clutched tightly in trembling hands, and ends with humiliation as she's banished to the kitchen by Mrs. Harrington, the iron-haired event coordinator who looks down on her like she's nothing more than dirt under her expensive heels. But this isn't just a tale of heartbreak. It's a story about resilience, secrets, and the explosive moment when destiny comes crashing back into your life. Elena's journey starts long before the night of the charity gala. 6 years ago, her life was turned upside down when her husband, William Montgomery, vanished without a trace. One day he was there, young and full of promise, and the next gone, leaving behind only rumors, empty bank accounts, and unanswered questions. The world branded him a thief, and Eleanor became collateral damage, losing not just her husband, but also her home, her dignity, and any sense of security. Fast forward to today, and here she is, standing in the same mansion where she once dreamed of belonging, reduced to scrubbing plates and dodging snide comments from waiters who treat her like invisible furniture. It's hard not to feel her pain as she moves through the crowd, invisible yet hyper-aware of every judgmental glance, every whispered insult. But the real twist, none of the guests know who Eleanor truly is, or rather, who she used to be. To them, she's just another faceless server, someone to refill their drinks and disappear into the background. They gossip openly around her, oblivious to the fact that they're talking about her life. Montgomery deal fell through, one man says casually, helping himself to a canapé without even acknowledging her presence. Not surprising after what happened with his wife, another replies. Elena's hands tremble slightly, causing the champagne flutes on her tray to clink together. She wants to scream, to tell them that she's right here, that they're dissecting pieces of her, shattered past, like it's some kind of entertaining scandal. But instead, she bites her tongue, focusing on the mountain of dirty dishes, waiting for her back in the kitchen. That's when it happens. The first crack in the facade. A latecomer arrives, commanding attention with his mere presence. Tall, impeccably dressed, exuding power and mystery, this man sweeps into the room like a storm, and when his searching gaze lands on Elena, something shifts, something neither she nor anyone else in that glittering ballroom could have predicted. Enter William Alexander, or should we say William Montgomery. Yes, the same man who disappeared 6 years ago, leaving Elena to pick up the pieces of their broken life. Only now, he's no longer the struggling businessman she married. He's a billionaire philanthropist, a name whispered with reverence in elite circles. When their eyes meet across the crowded room, time seems to stop. For a moment, all the noise fades away, the clinking glasses, the murmured conversations, the soft hum of classical music. There's only William, staring at Elena with an intensity that makes her knees weak. Then reality crashes back in, pulling them both into a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, anger, longing, disbelief. How do you confront someone you thought was dead? Someone whose absence left you drowning in grief and suspicion. As William approaches her, extending a hand like a lifeline, Elena is torn between running into his arms and slapping him across the face. Their reunion is anything but simple. It's messy, raw, and charged with years of unspoken words. Of course, the drama doesn't end there. The party quickly spirals into chaos as the truth begins to unravel. Jonathan Harrington, the host and grandson of the formidable Mrs. Harrington, watches the scene unfold with growing unease. His connection to William runs deeper than anyone realizes, and his reaction to the unexpected reunion raises more questions than answers. Is he friend or foe, ally or enemy? Meanwhile, Mrs. Harrington herself seems caught between outrage and calculation, her sharp eyes darting between Elena and William as if trying to piece together a puzzle she didn't know existed. And then there's Thomas Winters, the elderly gentleman who steps in with quiet authority, hinting at a larger conspiracy involving money laundering, offshore accounts, and dangerous criminal organizations. Every revelation adds another layer to the tangled web surrounding Elena and William, keeping viewers hooked and desperate for answers. As the tension builds, so does the emotional weight of the story. Elena's internal struggle becomes palpable. On one hand, she still loves William, the man she married, the man she mourned. On the other hand, the person standing before her feels like a stranger. He's older, harder, carrying scars both visible and invisible. Can she trust him again? Did he really leave to protect her, as he claims? Or was it something darker, more selfish? These are the questions gnawing at her heart as they retreat to a private study, away from prying eyes. But even in solitude, danger lurks close. Jonathan reappears, his charm masking something sinister. He drops bombshell after bombshell, accusing William of stealing millions and painting himself as the victim. The air crackles with tension as accusations fly, loyalties are tested, and old wounds are reopened. Just when it seems like things can't get worse, a gunshot echoes through the night, shattering the fragile calm. The aftermath leaves everyone reeling. Mrs. Harrington stands over her wounded grandson, her pearl-handled pistol smoking in her trembling hand. Her voice cuts through the chaos like steel. Not my grandson. In that single moment, alliances shift. Truths come to light, and the line between hero and villain blurs beyond recognition. Yet even as the sirens wail in the distance, signaling the arrival of authorities, the central mystery remains unsolved. Who is William Alexander really? What drove him to fake his death and build a new empire from scratch? And most importantly, will Elena find it in her heart to forgive him? Or will the betrayals of the past prove too much to overcome? As dawn breaks over the horizon, Elena and William escape to a secluded estate, nestled among pine trees. The house is modest compared to the opulence of the gala, offering a stark contrast to the world they've just left behind. Inside, sunlight streams through the windows, casting golden hues over a kitchen that feels strangely familiar. It's here, surrounded by domestic simplicity, that they sit down for coffee. The first quiet moment they've shared in 6 long years. But peace is fleeting. Too many secrets remain buried. Too many questions unanswered. As Eleanor holds the steaming mug in her hands, she looks at William and asks the question burning in her mind. Where do we go from here? His answer, simple yet loaded with meaning, leaves the door wide open for what's to come. Forward, he says softly. Together, if you'll have me. One day at a time. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers hanging on the edge of their seats, eager to see whether love can truly conquer all, or if some wounds run too deep to heal. As the morning sun painted the kitchen in warm hues, Elena found herself staring at the man across from her, trying to reconcile the stranger before her with the husband she had once loved so deeply. William's movements were deliberate, almost cautious, as if he feared breaking some invisible thread that still connected them. The coffee mug in his hands seemed more like a shield than a comfort, and Eleanor couldn't help but notice how his knuckles whitened when he gripped it too tightly. For all his wealth and power now, there was vulnerability in his eyes, a rawness that reminded her of the young man who had promised her forever 6 years ago. But promises can shatter, just like crystal on marble floors. And forgiveness wasn't something she could offer lightly. The photograph between them lay face up on the table, its edges worn from years of being tucked into wallets, nightstands, and pockets. It was proof of another life, one where they had been happy, hopeful, even naive. Back then, William had been an ambitious real estate developer with dreams of building affordable housing for families struggling to make ends meet. Or so she had thought. Now, sitting in this quiet kitchen, miles away from the chaos of the gala, Elena realized how little she truly knew about the man beside her. "You said your father's company was a front," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "But what does that mean? Money laundering? Arms dealing? What exactly were you running from?" William set the mug down carefully, his gaze never leaving hers. "Everything," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Dad didn't just launder money, he built an empire on it. Real estate development was the perfect cover. People trusted him because he gave back to the community, charity events, fundraisers, scholarships. But behind closed doors, he was funneling billions through offshore accounts. When I stumbled onto the truth, I didn't know what to do. Confronting him felt like stepping into quicksand. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous things became." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And then they started watching us." Elena's stomach churned at the memory of those final weeks before William vanished. His late-night phone calls, the security cameras installed without explanation, the way he would suddenly stop mid-conversation and change the subject. At the time, she had chalked it up to stress or paranoia. Looking back, though, the signs were glaringly obvious. "Was Jonathan part of it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did he know what your father was doing?" "Not at first," William replied, leaning forward. "Jonathan was my friend. Or at least I thought he was. We grew up together, went to school together. He introduced me to Thomas after Dad died, claiming he wanted to help me clean up the mess. But when I refused to play along, everything changed. That's why I disappeared. They made it clear. Either I cooperate or you pay the price." The weight of his words settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Elena's mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories she had long buried. Jonathan's sudden interest in her after William vanished, the job offers, the invitations to dinners, the casual questions about whether William had left anything behind. She had dismissed it all as concern, kindness even. Now she saw the calculated precision behind every gesture. "He used me," she murmured, anger bubbling beneath the surface. All those times he pretended to care. It was just manipulation. Thomas entered the room then, his presence a reminder that their story was far from finished. In his hand, he held a folder, thick with documents, photographs, and transcripts. "We've gathered enough evidence to dismantle the organization," he said, placing the folder on the table. "Bank records, wire transfers, names of key players. But exposing them won't be easy. These people have connections everywhere. Law enforcement, government agencies, corporate boards. If we're not careful, they'll bury us before we can act." Elena flipped through the pages, her heart pounding as she recognized names and faces from the gala. Mrs. Harrington's grandson wasn't the only one entangled in the web of corruption. Prominent philanthropists, respected business leaders, even politicians, they were all complicit. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about clearing William's name or bringing justice to those who had wronged them. It was bigger than that. It was about dismantling a system designed to exploit and destroy anyone who stood in its way. But as compelling as the evidence was, doubts lingered in Elena's mind. Why hadn't William taken her with him when he disappeared? If her safety had been his priority, wouldn't keeping her close have been the logical choice? And what about the millions transferred to untraceable accounts the night he vanished? Even if the money had been meant to protect her, it still felt like betrayal. "Why didn't you trust me?" she asked, her voice cracking under the weight of years of unanswered questions. "If you really loved me, why did you leave me alone? To face everything?" William reached for her hand, but she pulled away instinctively. Pain flickered across his face, followed by determination. "I wanted to take you with me," he confessed. "Every second I spent planning my escape, I imagined having you by my side. But Thomas convinced me it was too risky. They were monitoring your every move, Elena. If I had tried to contact you, if I had given any indication that you knew where I was, they would have killed you. Leaving you behind was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I believed it was the only way to keep you safe." His words struck a chord deep within her, yet they didn't fully silence the lingering mistrust. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, especially when the stakes were this high. As much as she wanted to believe him, the scars of abandonment ran too deep to heal so quickly. "What happens next?" she asked instead, redirecting the conversation. "Do we turn this over to the authorities? Do we go public, or do we handle it ourselves?" Thomas exchanged a glance with William before answering. "Going public isn't an option. Not yet. The media will twist the narrative, turning us into criminals before we even get a chance to present our case. As for the authorities," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Some are corrupt, others are too afraid to act. Right now, our best bet is to expose the organization piece by piece, starting with the weakest links. Once we create enough cracks in their foundation, the rest will crumble." The plan sounded straightforward enough, but Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. Every decision carried risks. Every move invited retaliation. And then there was Mrs. Harrington. Her intervention the previous night had saved their lives. But what price would she demand in return? The elderly woman's actions had been driven by love for her grandson, yet her methods were ruthless. Could they really count on her allegiance, or was she playing her own angle? As the hours passed, the tension in the house grew palpable. Outside, the world seemed eerily calm, birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. Inside, however, a storm was brewing. William pored over the documents, mapping out strategies and identifying targets. Thomas monitored communications, ensuring no one suspected their whereabouts. Meanwhile, Eleanor wandered the property, trying to process everything that had happened. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, burdened by the knowledge that their fight was far from over. By sunset, they had formulated a plan, a risky one, but one that offered a glimmer of hope. Using forged identities and encrypted channels, they would leak information to select journalists and whistleblowers, forcing the organization to scramble and reveal its weaknesses. Simultaneously, they would gather additional evidence, targeting key figures whose arrest would destabilize the entire network. It was a delicate operation, requiring precision and timing. One misstep, and they would lose everything. As night fell, the three of them gathered in the living room, the air thick with anticipation. "Are you ready for this?" William asked, his gaze locking onto Elena's. She hesitated, the enormity of what lay ahead pressing down on her shoulders. But then she remembered the humiliation of scrubbing dishes, the pain of losing her home, the years spent wondering if William had ever loved her at all. Anger surged within her, fueling her resolve. "Yes," she said firmly, meeting his eyes. "Let's finish this." With those words, the countdown began. Messages were sent, alliances formed, traps set. Somewhere in the distance, wheels turned, gears shifted, and enemies mobilized. The battle lines had been drawn, and there was no turning back. As Eleanor stood alongside William and Thomas, she felt a strange sense of unity, a shared purpose that transcended fear and doubt. Together, they would face whatever came next, one day at a time. As the sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a golden glow over the countertops, Elena realized that the hardest part of their journey was still ahead. The evidence they had gathered, bank records, wire transfers, and incriminating conversations, was enough to expose Jonathan and his family's criminal empire. But it wasn't just about bringing them down anymore. It was about proving to herself that William, the man sitting across from her now, was truly worthy of her trust again. "What happens if they come after us?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside her. William paused mid-sip of his coffee, setting the mug down carefully. "They will," he admitted. "But this time, we're ready." The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of preparation. Thomas worked tirelessly, coordinating with trusted allies in law enforcement and media outlets to ensure the evidence would reach the right hands without being buried or manipulated. Meanwhile, Eleanor and William spent hours talking, sometimes yelling, sometimes crying, as they unpacked 6 years of pain, secrets, and unanswered questions. Each conversation brought them closer to understanding not just who they were now, but who they could be together. Yet, even as the walls between them began to crumble, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There were pieces of the puzzle she still didn't have. That missing piece came unexpectedly one evening, when Mrs. Harrington appeared at their doorstep. Her normally impeccable appearance was frayed around the edges, her pearl necklace slightly askew, her hands trembling as she clutched an envelope. "I owe you more than an apology," she said, her voice brittle with emotion. Inside the envelope were documents detailing her late husband's involvement in the criminal organization and her own role in turning a blind eye for decades. "I thought I was protecting my family," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "But all I did was enable monsters." For the first time, Elena saw the woman not as the cold, calculating figure who had humiliated her, but as someone haunted by regret and guilt. Mrs. Harrington's confession added weight to their case, but it also raised new concerns. If she, a matriarch of such influence, had been complicit, how deep did the corruption go? And how many others like her existed within the system? These questions loomed large as they finalized their plan. They decided to release the evidence, incrementally, targeting key figures whose arrests would create chaos within the organization. It was risky. Every move invited retaliation, but they knew they couldn't wait any longer. The world needed to see the truth, no matter the cost. The first wave of revelations hit like a tsunami. Journalists scrambled to verify the documents. Whistleblowers came forward with corroborating testimonies, and public outrage grew with each passing day. Arrest warrants were issued for Jonathan and several high-profile associates. Though capturing then proved challenging. They had gone underground, using their vast resources to evade authorities. But Eleanor and William weren't deterred. With Thomas's guidance, they set up a sting operation, luring Jonathan into a trap under the guise of negotiating a deal. It was dangerous, reckless even, but Eleanor insisted on being part of it. "This isn't just your fight anymore," she told William firmly. "It's mine too." The confrontation took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Shadows danced across the walls as Jonathan stepped out of the shadows, his injured shoulder bandaged, but his demeanor unchanged. "You really think you can win this?" he sneered, his eyes darting between Eleanor and William. "Even if you destroy me, there will always be others. This empire doesn't die with me." His words sent a chill down Eleanor's spine, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. "Maybe," she replied, her voice steady, "but we'll make sure it starts with you." What followed was a tense standoff, with Jonathan attempting to bargain, threaten, and manipulate his way out of the situation. But he hadn't accounted for Elena's resolve, or the team of undercover agents who stormed the building moments later. As handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Jonathan turned to Elena, his expression unreadable. "You'll never be free of him," he spat, nodding toward William. "He'll always choose power over you." Elena didn't respond. Instead, she walked away, leaving Jonathan's words to echo in the empty space behind her. In the weeks that followed, the fallout dominated headlines worldwide. Trials began, fortunes were seized, and reputations crumbled. Through it all, Elena found herself reflecting on what it meant to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered because of the organization's greed. She and William moved into a small house near the coast, far from the opulence and danger of their previous lives. It wasn't perfect. They still argued, still struggled to reconcile the past with the present, but it was real. And for the first time in years, Elena felt hopeful. One morning, as they sat on the porch, watching the waves crash against the shore, William reached for her hand. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't disappeared?" he asked softly. Elena smiled, squeezing his fingers. "All the time," she admitted. "But maybe this is better. We've both changed, grown. Maybe we needed to lose everything to find what really matters." William nodded, pulling her close. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. No more running, no more lies." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Elena realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to move forward despite it. She glanced at the photograph on the table beside her, the same one she had carried for 6 long years, and felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she believed they could walk it side by side, together, one day at a time.